We won't wait. We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland,
Our
Africa. With our courage, we will innovate for our time.
We will raise up a new generation of independent actors who, with us, will build a new tomorrow.
We won't wait. We won't run.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and JamFest.
Good morning and welcome to our closing plenary for JamFest and the Civic Tech Innovation Forum. Thank you for joining us from all across the continent and of course across the world for this year's conference and festival under the theme DIY Africa. It's been a really great week of learning, of sharing, of collaboration, and I hope that this concluding plenary will sort of tie everything together. My name is Tapo Shabalala, and I lead the JamLab project here at the Wits Center for Journalism. And alongside me will be Geshi Karuri Saburi from the Civic Tech Innovation Network, who will host this session with me. This session is hosted by JamLab and the Civic Tech Innovation Network. And we hope that you will leave inspired by this week's sessions. And of course, some of the two speakers that we have coming to speak to us today. A few housekeeping rules. Now that we have probably welcomed you, I want to cover sort of things that you should look out for throughout the session. If you can, please share and tweet today's conversation on social media using the hashtag JamFestAfrica2021, CTIF21, and then DIY Africa. Really want this discussion to be interactive. And so please do share the Q&A, do share or ask your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for any questions directed to our speakers who will come on a little bit later on. And then please use the comments section for queries, for comments on your right-hand side. Remember that you can also, if you prefer listening to the session in French, the globe icon at the bottom of your screen, please click on that. Select your preferred language. We have French interpretation, and then mute original audio to hear that French interpretation. For now, that's it from my side in terms of housekeeping. I would like to introduce one of our performers from this past week. You know, as we always do with the CTIF and JamFest openings, we have an emerging tradition of celebrating African innovation alongside the recognition and enjoyment of artistic and cultural talents that inspire us as Africans, you know, that talks to our values and truths and creativity. And so for this closing ceremony, we have a return act, back by popular demand, the award-winning singer and songwriter and storyteller, Plenary, who graces us with her talents this year, but also did so last year at Urban Festival in October. Plenary says that she is never without a lived experience that has etched into her heart and mind. And this is likely why she presents highly expressive musical journeys and stories that resonate with audiences around the world. She explores her own inspiration and identity and influences in a sonic and poetic narration that is captivated us last year and through to this year. We welcome her again to the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and JamFest. This is Plenary Bubu.
When I was in corporate once, before I kind of came into this career 10 years ago, I wrote the song to myself to hold myself accountable for my own purpose and my own story so I can actually make a change in the world. And just to the theme of kind of DIY Africa, this is kind of encouraging people to do that thing that is their talent and that is authentic to them. So to those of you who are misunderstood and need to get up and do it, this song is for you. Misunderstood. Life's only good when everything you do is everything about you. Misunderstood, life's as it should. When stories told her of you living life for you. Lady Lou, tell me what you gonna do. You know, we know, the world is waiting on you. Hey, Lady Lou, just say you could do everything only for you. Do things your own way, and you will find the joy in living life in your way. Say things in your own words, and you will find the joy in saying things you mean. Misunderstood, life's only good when everything you do is everything about you. Baby, ooh, just say you could. It's not that you have so much to prove. Hey, lady, Lou, come and let's see you move. 'Cause you know, we know, the world is waiting on you. Do things your own way, and you will find the joy in living life in your way. Say things in your own words, and you will find the joy in saying things you mean. Life's a rose when you know who you are in this world today. Living life for you. Oh, life's a rose when you know who you are in this world today. Living life for you. So do things your own way, and you will find the joy in living life in your way. Say things in your own words, and you will find the joy in saying things you mean. So do things in your own way. Come on and say the things you mean. Come on out, come on out, come on and say it. You know you mean it. Come on and say it. Come on out, come on out, come on and say. Do things your own way, and you will find the joy in living life for you. Ooh. Thank you very much. It's been so good to be back. If some of you want to catch last year's performance, you can find it at the Urban Festival 2000.
Awesome stuff. Great song from Plenary Boo Boo. We will hear later from her in our program, and we welcome you to catch the talents of Stu Moya, who also played at our opening ceremony and has been livening up our Giant Fest and Civic Tech Innovation Forum week. Again, we thank Badil Entertainment, host of SA's up-and-coming showcase for sounds that have animated our DIY Africa sessions all week. Before we get into the discussions, I also want to share a video of highlights of some of the great takeaways and comments that came out from this week.
We won't wait. We won't run.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.
Civic tech and media innovation are ones of activists and digital innovators who are using these new technologies to address a wide range of societal issues.
We have invested particularly at Luminate on two types of technologies. Those that enable governments to serve people better, and technologies that empower people to have a voice in decision-making and to hold governments to account.
The overarching monolith of capitalist structures have reduced somewhat because of the availability of new technologies.
If you think about different ways of governing data and technology, for example, could we have collectives? How can we have things that are more open source? Or how do we have collectives where groups of people own the data, for example?
For me, the beginning of trust starts with transparency. What we learned with our dashboard is that we needed to be open about who we were and what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Audiences found that it was very hard to take information because these days news organizations will give you everything all at once, and breaking news, just constant stream of information, and it's hard to make sense of that.
It's good to understand your audience, where they're located, what's their age, what devices. So understanding what platform your product is on will dictate what kind of metrics or analytics you're going to look out.
We have all of these socioeconomic hindrances to evolving into a smart city and making sure that that is a democratic process where everyone has access.
And we really think that inclusive utility services such as energy, water, sanitation, waste management, and transport support urban resilience.
More than 17.6 million people across Africa have used the Change.org platform. Over the past 4 years, more than 90,000 petitions have been started across the continent.
These online campaigns hit on critical issues and really start to shape national consciousness and get citizens into spaces where they can start asking those critical questions.
There's a lot of demand for local African voices. Ultimately, audiences want a relationship that's much more than just payments.
We're also operating in an extraordinarily patriarchal society. So we may not appear to be big like the big media houses. That's not to say the impact is not happening.
The readers are becoming more and more accustomed to paying for stuff online, so paying for content in particular. Investing in quality journalism, in quality people, is a key driver in all of that.
It is extremely important to still focus on why we're here in the first place. There's a reason why you decided to create this organization, the products or services.
Corruption is a huge problem in Africa, and it has been for a number of years. And why we think tech and innovation would be important is because it can start to introduce preventative measures and close systemic loopholes.
We really can make some bad choices if we're not talking to people. And if there's an idea from the startup world that you're not at risk of losing your idea by talking to people about it, because you're already ahead by having this idea and by having these conversations.
Able to use the network in terms of getting out our message and meeting like-minded organizations, individuals, people in the space.
They just said they really enjoyed how we've opened up that space.
Thank you for joining us. Visit our websites and social media platforms to continue the conversation.
That was some of the highlights from the week, and one thing that stood out for us at GemFest, is how a lot of the speakers, sort of spoke about the idea of ownership in most sessions, how Africans have created their own products, but it is necessary for us to create our own means of distribution of these products, thus taking sort of ownership of the entire chain of production. And in one of the fireside chats about podcasting Africa, Sally Tiam said that as much as there are a variety of products, of podcasts in Africa, we need distribution platforms that are similar to what your Spotify's and Apple's. And during the opening plenary on Monday, panelists touched on how it's necessary for us as Africans to be in control of our own story. And one of the ways to be in control is owning and taking control of the African narrative. You heard in the video, in the highlights, how Alea from the Lamb Sisterhood in Kenya said that her organization, may not appear to be big like, your traditional media houses. And that's not to say that there isn't impact, or the impact of their work is not happening, or that it's not to say that the landscape isn't changing. It's just that the eyes are not on them yet. It speaks volumes. She was talking about, small media houses or publications. And I think that spoke to our theme of DIY Africa, that Africans may not have the power compared to Western countries, but our capabilities and abilities can rival those with bigger power, or the hegemonic power. And I think that's what DIY Africa is about, creating a space or a platform for Africans to share ideas and their experiences. Those are some of the sort of the takeaways from the sessions from JamFest. Others emphasize the importance of investing in good quality journalism, irrespective of the size of your media organizations or platform. That building a relationship with your users and audiences is quite key, and that's just sort of a synthesis of some of the key takeouts that came out of the JamFest sessions. And of course, the recordings are there. You can always go back and re-listen and re-watch the panels, the workshops, the fireside chats. They're all there for you to take on. And generally across all the JamFest sessions, there was a sense of positivity and excitement and the prospect of journalism and media across the continent, and what people are creating, and the amazing work that's been produced by everybody within the small and medium and even large news organizations. I want to bring in my colleague Geshi to share some of the takeaways from the Civic Tech Innovation Forum sessions this past week. Geshi?
Thanks, Tsepo. And it was really cool as well to see that video, just pulling out some of those highlights, because it really has been a very full week. And so I'll just mention some of what we took away on the Civic Tech side. And there was so much in the week. As Tsepo has said, we will share all of that. But just perhaps to highlight a few. We were reminded, first and foremost, about the politics of data. We were reminded about civic empowerment and civic tech, and in fact, how it ought to be civic empowerment over civic tech, that we focus on our impact and the why, not just the how, the tech and the tools. So as we remember that these things are political, and because of a new knowledge-based paradigm, if you want, that was proposed, this interconnectedness and the data transformations, that ironically, there may actually be new opportunities for us to shift power by focusing, ironically, on the problems that we have: agriculture, health, education. So it sounded to me very much like the time is ripe for this idea of DIY Africa. We also heard from various speakers in the urban conversations demonstrating our antiquated policy environments that we need to upgrade. And we also explored how local governments and other ecosystem actors could really help to create the fertile ground for civic innovators and new partnerships. And that would include private sector, universities, and the like, to really thrive and intervene into these stubborn development problems that have not gone away just because technology is changing. So I think that was an important point, that we really sit with many of the same old problems. And we were reminded that we can do so much in Africa, and that in fact we do so much already. So Danai Nanda, who I think is here with us, the country director of change.org, said to us that active citizens are the unsung heroes of how change happens on this continent. And technology is the infrastructure that African citizens are using to amplify their voices. So I think a really powerful reminder there. But yet we were also reminded that we face many divides and power imbalances that keep coming up, in our conversations, and they kept coming up all week. And these are obstacles that continue to disempower and to marginalize the others, the rural, the poor, the queer, the young, the non-male, the Black, the whatever. And so one of the comments from Olga Mugienyi, also from change.org, was that their mission is to empower people everywhere to create the change that they want to see. And that includes or embeds a vision where no one is powerless, and creating change ought to be part of our everyday lives. But yet, as one of the participants in the urban session said, African innovation is like a secret society. We need to communicate. So indeed, communication is what the week has been all about. And we heard about new democracy and advocacy tools. We heard about DIY approaches that can help us to intervene into critical issues such as corruption in Africa. But we were also reminded that civic tech actors have a responsibility not just to produce tools, to produce stuff, widgets, but also to put them out there and to make sure they're accessible and to encourage communities to use them and to show people and train people on how to use them. The practitioners were also saying that as Africans, we need to design our digital solutions with due consideration of our culture, of who we are, that we must ensure we are not losing what is African in us, where our identity is our greatest asset. It is who we are, as Pilani was just singing. So the speakers were very much proponents, in fact, of using low or even no code platforms that are accessible, that are easy to use, in addition to the likes of social media channels and other traditional wave functions. We were also reminded that we are not where we ought to be in terms of digital rights protections, and these are important issues, but that we also need to develop contextual perspectives on how the rights issues and regulations might be understood and addressed in Africa. We had very robust conversations about the shifts in the funding environment, how it is broken, and how we need new business models, perhaps for innovation, civic innovation in Africa. We need business models that are perhaps not fashioned as though we were startups or small versions of tech corporations looking for venture capital. Many questions were raised, both by funders as well as those who are funded, actually, in this regard. So we hope that's an important starting point for new conversations. And last but not least, for those who managed to, we had the 10 IR sessions, which offered us a moment of just pause. It was really a powerful reminder of who we are as Africans, that we need to take the time to center ourselves, especially in these hectic times where we've got all of these converging crises and loss and trauma. A reminder that we need to take the time to slow down, to listen, to recalibrate to something that makes sense to us and that empowers us and energizes us for this call to DIY. So that's sort of some of the highlights that we took away on our side, and thanks, Tsepo, for sharing yours. But where we'd like to take the conversation now is really to open back up to practitioners and intellectuals from our continent. We are really lucky to have two keynote inputs from innovative and inspiring figures with us today. We've got Hopewell Chinono and we've got Olusegun Onigbinde. So perhaps we will lead into them without further ado. So I'm going to just quickly introduce Hopewell. I asked to do this, Hopewell, even though Tsepo is actually the media person here, just because I consider you to be a friend and a well-respected peer. So Hopewell Chinono is a Harvard University-trained Zimbabwean international journalist. He's also an acclaimed documentary filmmaker and an activist. He has won numerous awards in journalism and film. Some of you know him best for his multiple arrests and imprisonments and persecution by the government of Zimbabwe. Others may know him for his Demloot Twitter campaign that had us all grooving to expose corruption. To many of us, he's a storyteller and an activist who doesn't back down from the pursuit of truth-telling and Africa's development. It is really my great honor to welcome to the stage the inspirational Hopewell Chinono. Welcome, Hopewell. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Gage, for that introduction. And I felt inspired when the session started with music. Thank you very much. I think Africa right now is a little bit better than what it was 10, 15 years ago in terms of media, but we're still lagging behind. So I'll start with my own country, Zimbabwe. I want to use that as a case study to show where we are. I think we have to accept that the colonial governments set up state broadcasting institutions and state newspapers in order to control the flow of information. And so the first two countries in sub-Saharan Africa to have television were Zimbabwe and Nigeria in 1960. The irony is that today Nigeria has got about 150 television stations, and Zimbabwe still has that one TV station that was set up in 1960. The idea of controlling television stations is happening in Zimbabwe, is to make sure that the narrative remains that of the ruling elite, and in this case, ZANU-PF, and that other voices which are dissenting are not given a platform to be heard by the electorate. But this is changing, and I'll get to that as I move forward. So when we got our independence in 1980, the Nigerians gave us $5 million to buy the group of newspapers that was called the Argus group of newspapers. It was used by the Smith regime essentially as a tool, propaganda tool, spreading lies and crude propaganda. The system was so bad that the pictures of people like Robert Mugabe were banned from being put in those newspapers. And sadly, we thought that with independence, we were going to see a transformation from those said colonial days. But what the post-colonial government in Zimbabwe, which was led by Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF did, was essentially to inherit those tools of propaganda and continue to ruthlessly use them in the same manner, if not worse, that Ian Smith and his colonial government used them. We had a situation where you could not get access to those newspapers. When the Nigerians paid 5 million for the Argus group, for us, it was a gift to the Zimbabwean people. But the group then and today is not in the hands of the Zimbabwean people. It is in the hands of a political party which appoints journalists, editors, and board members, which decides what is reported. And so, for instance, for the past 30 to 50 days, every front page of that group has got the president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, on it, as if that's the only news item in the country. Yet we've got hospitals that do not have access to medication. We've got schools that do not have books. We have got a 95% unemployment rate, and which essentially means 95% of our potential workforce is out of work. All those things are not reported because they paint a picture of incompetence and corrupt rule on the present regime, which is what it is. And as we moved forward in post-colonial Zimbabwe, in 2000, the crisis, or rather around 1997, the economic crisis started, and an opposition party was formed, and the repression became worse. And the newspapers were now captured in a way that they were not even allowed to give a voice to the opposition party that had been formed, the Movement for Democratic Change that was formed by Morgan Tsvangirai in 1999. And so it continued as such. And now Zimbabweans who wanted to hear alternative news or alternative narratives had to turn to international television through satellite, with DSTV being the main one, and other ones that were controlled by Indians and from Dubai. Now, the majority of the citizens could not afford this, so this became a platform for the elites who could access that information. And with that came news channels like Sky News, ENCA, SABC News, reporting back into Zimbabwe what was happening in Zimbabwe. So in order to stop that, the government banned international news outfits, except for Al Jazeera, because it had been captured by ZANU-PF elites. And one of the guys that was reporting for Al Jazeera it became a government minister in Robert Mugabe's, and indeed Emmerson Mnangagwa's government, and is now a ZANU-PF member of parliament. And it explains why Al Jazeera was the only one that was allowed to report and everyone else was banned out of Zimbabwe. And it remains the case that on paper, they say international media is allowed to come, but when international media applies to come into Zimbabwe, they are denied routinely. One of our journalists who works for the New York Times spent some weeks in prison because his crew from New York Times had come into Zimbabwe, and then they said the application was not done properly. It's a repressive way of trying to control the media. But now it's difficult to control the media because we now have social media. We have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, and those are the main three platforms that are used in Zimbabwe. And of course, you have YouTube. And because of that, we as journalists have been able to use these tools to tell our story. As I did last year when I discovered that the government was looting public funds meant for COVID-19, I had to use Twitter to expose the looting of those public funds, and also to expose the plunder of the nation's natural resources, which routinely takes place. Because to just give you an understanding of how bad the plunder is, every month in Zimbabwe, 100 million worth of diamond, worth of gold, $100 million worth of gold is smuggled out of Zimbabwe every month by ZANU-PF elites. And yet hospitals in Zimbabwe, all central hospitals in Zimbabwe, only require $50 million a year to run smoothly. So what it means is ZANU-PF elites are plundering gold and smuggling it worth $100 million. And what they are smuggling out of the country in a month could run all our central hospitals for 2 years. So in order for us to be able to educate the citizen about the impact of corruption, we have had to turn to social media. And last year when I did that, I ended up in prison. I was arrested a week or two before, or a week or two after ZANU-PF had held a press conference where they accused me of exposing the president's family in what was essentially a rampant looting frenzy of COVID-19 funds. It just didn't include the president's family, as ZANU-PF said, but many other people, including the health minister, who was subsequently fired because of those exposures. So it shows that social media is a very powerful tool, because if it could result in a government minister being fired, although the president wanted to hold on to him, it shows that the pressure of social media is even much better than what we get from newspapers, traditional newspapers. Because in the past, in the 80s, newspapers could only publish in the morning and people read and then you talk in your homes. But in social media, journalists can publish information and it's interactive. The whole day the citizens will be talking about it. The whole day they will be demanding accountability from their own government. What has made the situation worse with traditional media in Zimbabwe is that even the supposedly private media outlets, they've been captured by political parties, in this case by ZANU-PF or factions of ZANU-PF. So we have a situation where the state media is reporting on ZANU-PF, and those that are captured by ZANU-PF and its factions also regurgitating the same stuff, that propaganda that's coming from state media. And this has been caused by a breakdown of the economic order in Zimbabwe. There's economic strife. There's no employment, as I mentioned much earlier. 95% of our potential job workforce is out of work. There's no investment coming into the country. And this is because all this mess is underpinned by corrupt rule, clansmanship, and incompetence, which has made the situation in Zimbabwe unbearable for the average Zimbabwean, especially the youth. And because the youth now have access to social media, it has become a little bit much easier to communicate. But I will take you back to 2019, when there were protests against an increase in fuel prices. The government realized that social media was a potent force and that it was being used by people to communicate about what's happening in the country, and they switched off the internet. So that is one of the problems that we now face, that even though we have with social media, internet can be switched off. We saw that in Zambia. It has happened in 5-6 other countries on the continent in the past 2-3 years. And it's one of the tools that draconian regimes are using. And the other tool that they're using is repressive laws. So for instance, there's a cyber security bill that is waiting for President Mnangagwa to sign. It's meant to curtail our freedoms to express ourselves. It talks about a crime which is centered around lying. And lying can be very subjective, because what the government might call lying is an opinion that is expressed by someone else, and then they call it a lie. So it makes it difficult for people to communicate. But because social media knows no boundaries or borders, people are able to communicate from various parts of the world. And this is what has been happening, especially in our case in Zimbabwe, where things that people are afraid to communicate in Zimbabwe, they are communicated by Zimbabweans based in South Africa, in Kenya, and in other parts of the world. When a media does not work, like the case we have in Zimbabwe, it makes it difficult for corruption to be curtailed. Corruption flourishes when the media is not working properly. Corruption becomes the order of the day when the government is not being held accountable, either through exposures or through direct interviews by the media, the traditional interviews that we have seen. So I will round off by saying that, you know, there are case studies that we can look at. If you look at a country like Kenya, Kenya's media has developed much faster than Zimbabwe. And there's a correlation between even the economic development and the development of the media in Kenya. So Zimbabwe's economy was bigger than Kenya's economy in 1992. Today, Kenya's economy is 5 times bigger than Zimbabwe's economy. And this is translated not just in economic terms, but in terms of the freedom that citizens have to express themselves, or the rights that are underpinned by the Constitution for journalism to thrive. And even if you look at international awards that are available where Africans can compete in journalism, you find that the Kenyans dominate. And I think sometime this week there was an element that was discussed that we saw when the session started, of Africans telling their own stories. South Africa is a good example. South Africa, when you look at stations or broadcasting institutions like BBC World Service, they're not very popular in South Africa. Although they are available, they are not very popular because South African media is strong. When you have a strong media, people are then able to tell their own stories, to speak to themselves and to speak to the rest of the world. That is why SABC has become a dominant force on the African continent. In Zimbabwe, if we want to watch what's happening in our own country, we have to turn to SABC. In many other parts of the continent, it is the same story. So the real reason why we're not able to tell our own stories and why we end up having foreigners come from Europe, from America to tell our own stories is because the state has constrained the media space. It's difficult for a Zimbabwean to tell their story to the world when they cannot even tell their story to themselves in their own country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hopewell, for that. Truly quite a lot to take in, you know, for somebody who living in South Africa, you know, we take these media freedoms often for granted. And I'm interested to ask, based on how everybody's using social media, what role can digital media play in an environment like Zimbabwe, where somebody's able to get onto the internet, create a publication, and share what is happening in Zimbabwe? What role can digital media, and is it playing a role yet in Zimbabwe?
Digital media is a very important platform that I think most people in repressive regimes have had to tend to. And I mean, in ordinary times, digital media should be there, but in Zimbabwe, it has become very important because that's the only platform that is now trusted. That's the only platform that Zimbabweans can have access to in terms of information that is not state political propaganda. So for instance, last year, when I exposed the looting of public funds, it was in conjunction with a colleague journalist, Dudus Matutu. He runs a digital platform called ZimLive. This year, the same platform ran some stories which resulted in the vice president resigning, Kembo Mohadi. And so digital platforms are very important, and we should, as Africans, invest in them as citizens first by making sure that we assist them financially if we're going to get good quality journalism. The state has made it extremely difficult for digital platforms to get funding because they know that by throttling funding, these platforms cannot survive. So for instance, when I was arrested on the 20th of July, I was charged with incitement to violence, and yet I was reporting about a protest march which was earmarked for the 31st of July. I was reporting what the organizers of that march were talking about. It was a march against corruption. But when the state came into my home, they took all my cameras that I use for my work. They took all my laptops, they took my phones, all the tools that I use for my journalistic work were taken. So the reason why they do this is in order to constrain you from doing your work and to make sure that the only narrative that is heard in the country, the only narrative that becomes dominant, even on their own digital platforms, is the state narrative. They don't want us to talk about corruption. They don't want us to talk about the looting of public funds. They don't want us to talk about their incompetence. They don't want us to talk about how they plunder the nation's natural resources. They don't want us to talk about how, for instance, in Zimbabwe, 2,500 women are dying every year because we don't have facilities. The biggest hospital in Zimbabwe, Harare Hospital, only has 2 maternity theaters. Only one of them is working. Both maternity theaters were built in 1977, and the average citizen did not know about this until we started talking about it using digital media, using social media. So these forms of new media are very important in building a democratic society in which citizens have access to information, which can assist them to make the right decisions when they're interfacing with public life.
Maybe if I can jump in there, Hopewell. So you mentioned yourself that one of the risks, obviously, with social media is the prospect of shutdowns, and we've seen that where the platforms can be shut off. I also wondered, and I'm asking this as a Kenyan who sometimes sees the lines between the telling of the political stories being blurred with almost entertainment. It's almost like the politics become something people just consume, and it's, I'm not always sure whether we have a handle on the actual efficacy in shifting and impacting the power in politics that those stories are meant to be contributing to. And I wondered whether you have a view on this, to what extent are we, through using these channels to these broad publics, managing to actually shift, for example, these issues of corruption through telling those stories?
I think it's a very important question. It's important for us as Zimbabweans because, interestingly, it touches on the issue of entertainment. So in Zimbabwe, you'll be interested to know that some of the most serious political content is now coming through entertainment. So we have what's called Bus-Stop TV. It's a group of comedians. They reflect on what's happening in the country using comedy. We have what's called Magamba TV. It's a group of entertainers, comedians, musicians, and so forth. And they are using comedy as an art form to tell the stories. We have people who do satire around what the president does and says, how he speaks. But through that satire, they're able to express the stories of the day so that people who are in Zimbabwe and outside Zimbabwe are able to understand what's going on. In fact, as a matter of fact, the traditional media has failed dismally to tell the political story such that if you want to know about child marriages in Zimbabwe, you actually turn to Bus-Stop TV. They do it as a form of comedy, but it's a very powerful form of comedy where they are able to express the depressing situations and issues like child marriages in Zimbabwe, like the looting of public funds. If you want to know about how people are living in dilapidated apartments in some of the most poorest places in Zimbabwe, again, it has been Bus-Stop TV that has been able to go out there and tell the stories. And sometimes they tell the stories as jokes. Right now, we've got a campaign to make sure that young Zimbabweans are registered to vote for 2023. Again, it has been entertainment outfits like Bus-Stop who have been using comedy to tell the story, because the traditional media platforms have failed dismal again to explain to young people that it's important for them to register to vote, and that if they don't register to vote, if they don't vote, it's as good as if they voted because the ruling party will come back, and yet they're complaining about its failures, its corruption, and its incompetence.
Thank you so much, Hopeful. Those were really sort of insightful information coming out of Zimbabwe. We'll come back to Hopewell later in this conversation, but I want to bring in Olusegun for the moment. Before I do so, I want to encourage everybody in the room that if you do have questions or comments, please use the Q&A function. We will have a discussion after Olusegun speaks, so please, guys, do so using the Q&A function. Now on the future of civic tech innovation and DIY Africa. Olusegun is the co-founder and director of Budget, which is well-known to many in the civic tech space. Budget is Nigeria's leading fiscal transparency group that uses creative design and technology to improve access to public budgets and related fiscal data, rather. Olusegun sits on One Africa Policy Advisory Board and is a member of the OGP, that is Open Government Partnership for the Global Steering Committee. Olusegun, take us through some of insights or what you see is the future of civic tech innovation on the continent.
Thanks so much, Chepo. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Olusegun, as you mentioned. I'm the director for Budget, and we're based in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia, and we also have plans to open offices in East Africa soon. I will talk about the future of civic tech in Africa and why this is important. And I will first even lay a marker that civic tech is about trying to shorten the distance between the citizen and their government, using technology to improve that process. Either could simplify it, that could make it more accessible, it could transform the conversation between the people and their government. And that's what the whole essence of civic tech is at the end of the day. And for us, we've seen different shoots, either what Budget is doing in Nigeria or what we have Odeco doing in Ghana, or Mzalendo in Kenya, or even what you have with Golf Chat in South Africa. So many different examples of civic tech happening within the continent. But one thing that I'm very much certain is that we have to first understand that civic space is shrinking, and the previous speaker made it clear about the current challenges of even protecting democracy. And it is not even just the issue with Zimbabwe or with Congo DRC, or wherever you might feel that democracy has retreated significantly. These are even challenges in leading or frontier democracies in Africa, like Senegal, even Nigeria, South Africa, even Kenya, that our previous speaker fully admonished. The reality is that civic technology would not be divorced from this kind of conversation. For example, in Nigeria recently, over 100 days ago, Twitter, which is a very strong microblogging platform that is used to hold government accountable, was blocked by the government. I mean, they commanded, which is that word, rightfully, that all telecommunications companies should shut down the platform, and it was done. Now, the pivoting and adaptation of that for use of VPN and tools come across that we are going to be facing much more processes like that, where government will reenact or will even resurrect laws or acts that residue of the military era to be able to tamper with the civic space. So number one, in my view, the future of civic tech is very, very linked into even the protection of democracy. We will not run away from building technologies to innovate out of abuse of power. And something very clear that the previous speaker mentioned. Abuse of power is very important. Is an existential issue for liberty, for liberal societies, and we will need to build it down. The second point in my own view that it would be much more human-centered. There is no point when we talk about technology. There's always this fetishization to think that we are putting through another app or another platform on Google Play or App Store. No, technology will be very, very fluid in definition. and when we define what is civic tech. So if radio is a technology to simplify and maybe bring people to be closer to people, then it definitely will bring radio on board. If it is print, if it is television, if it is good old gong making, we would do that. I mean, whatever we call civic tech would be human-centered and would be contextually relevant. So those are things that will be a major key principle for civic tech. In budget, we learn this the hard way, that irrespective of how glamorous our work might be on social media, to be able to reach the larger span of Nigerians, we will have to go deep down to the grassroots and engage them. And this informed our creation of Tracker in 2014, which is a platform that we use to track service delivery in local communities. And it's been one of our most important and successful products because it speaks to the issue at the heart of the majority of Nigerians. I mean, so definitely, when we talk about civic technology as we push along the way, we would have to innovate around solving issues that are contextually relevant to the communities that we serve. It should not be a recreation of wherever works in the West or wherever works in the global South or in the global North. It has to be things that are relevant within communities and what we feel technology that meets their need at that point, what it is. The third one, I mean, in terms of what's building civic tech, so we cannot run away about the youth bulge in Africa. We cannot take away the fact that Africa is going to be the youngest continent, and to continue to be so for the years to come. And the rapid uptake of digitization is going to be continuously relevant. So more people on Twitter, more people on Facebook, most people using digital tools to try to hold government accountable. Very, very, very important is that we would have to build within that regard. And how do we build within that space? Is that we would definitely have to apply data to build engagement. I mean, data will continuously be critical in holding government accountable. Data will continuously be a strong engagement to hold government accountable, and that's something that it has to be big on our minds. For years, we have been big on our data, or what we call factivism, have to continuously be relevant to the people that we engage. So as we are trying to build more conversation with people, we'll have to bring data to the table. And innovating around that data, which means we're able to apply machine learning techniques, artificial intelligence techniques, will be critical with how we uncover corruption, or how we check abuses, or how we even be able to build people into a register that we can continuously engage. So in my own view, those are the critical elements for us to look at when we come about civic tech. Finally, civic tech for us will have to be solution oriented. The reality is that the problems of Africa, that ails Africa, would need an handshake across the board. That means as we go along the way, when we see an opportunity, a genuine opportunity, I mean, we will have to merge our civic tech with gov tech. It's always very evident that the private sector or the not-social space are a little bit ahead of when we come gov tech solutions. So for example, in budget, we have been able to inspire the Nigerian government to adopt simplified budgeting and to engage the citizens at scale on that. We have been able to influence them on how project tracking should be done. So we also see that civic technology across Africa will be much more influential in trying to transforming government. So it's not just be about we're trying to engage in a game of survival of the noisiest. We'll also see that when we see opportunities for engagement in terms of blending our technology and institutionalizing them in government, will be open to such opportunities. So I think I will stop at that point, and I'll be glad to invite your questions. Thank you very
much. Thank you so much, Olusegun. I think this is really quite motivating, and I particularly like that you lead in by talking about tech, not necessarily meaning the fancy apps and tools that everybody tends to center when we talk about civic tech. And actually this week we heard a lot about that, and people talking about solutions that are, as you said, more contextually relevant. I was intrigued by this final point you are making about civic tech and gov tech beginning to merge, because one of the things, at least in our context, I've sometimes wondered about is, I suppose that is fine, and it's a critique we've had also with this idea of the DIY Africa, as long as it's not about abdicating the responsibility of governments to invest in their own literacy and their own capabilities to do the things they ought to do. And I wonder if you have any view on that. So the critique was, well, as we push DIY and as we celebrate the innovations of the Civic, are we under-focusing on, in fact, the responsibilities of governments to do these things, to regulate these things, but also to fund these things, because we're running around using philanthropic dollars in some cases to do the jobs of government. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much, Yes, yeah, I mean, you're right. The part of the DIY, we must be able to know that there's a role for the citizen and there are roles for the government. And maybe in Nigeria, they try to build this conversation on what they call supply side and the demand side. The role of citizens is to hold government accountable and to fulfill every civic duty in the payment of taxes, voting, and things like that. Citizens have to be very, very clear about that, about their own place within the social contract, and how they don't build mini territories or governments of their own. Government should be responsible for what they do. What I'm just trying to say is that there will be a convergence between civic tech and GovTech, because as citizens begin to do more work on accountability and hold government accountable from the exterior point of view, the government also begins to understand these technologies and how they can adapt them on their own functions and their own roles. So for example, if we have a project tracking tool on the exterior that we're using to track public projects and report to government on the status of project, the government believes that, okay, I can also build my own internal project tracking tool, so that also gives me a first level kind of information. If we have built a platform for reporting of sexual offenders and build maybe a blockchain register on the basis of that, the government begins to understand that we also have to step up our own capabilities in terms of maybe linking that with the judicial systems and maybe building a way around that. So in some sort of way, because I know our government can be slow, and also can be very, very, especially the bureaucracy around government, can be very resistant to change. The reality is that they need to see inspiration from some space and a bit of knocking, some hard-done knocking for some space before they make that adaptation. I think that's what I'm alluding to, that convergence finally happen.
And maybe just to follow up on that, do you see any, how do you see the future of the funding of the civic tech? And I ask it specifically in this context because it's one of the issues people raised, where some people felt that governments should not fund civic tech, and that, because others can, and there were some arguments for why that should be. Of course, there's a real challenge right now of civic tech being reliant almost wholly on philanthropy and largely international philanthropy. I don't know if you have any view on this. Sorry, you're mute. Yeah.
I mean, we governments. There's a huge dependence. We have to be honest on philanthropic dollars for the acceleration of civic tech that we've seen. And it's just there are two problems here. One is that I might not expect government, because you're trying to hold someone accountable and you're trying to keep your voice independent. I think more of the failure is around African philanthropy. I mean, African philanthropy has been really, really focused not on systemic and institutional reforms, but more geared towards solving charitable support. It's like you're fixing symptoms. You're funding high DP camps, internal displacement camps. You're trying to provide a food, bag, school. I mean, you're trying to take the place of government, and that looks cool for a CSR. Bill. But the reality is that you're not digging deep, into the institutional, into the structural issues around bad governance, corruption, apathy around the citizens. You're not dealing with those things. I mean, as long as you don't deal with that, you will just keep treating the symptoms, and it's constantly unsustainable. So I think there has to be, and I know there's an African Philanthropic Conference that holds, a forum that holds, and I think there has to be much more awareness that African leaders, especially and with corporate network or even rich leaders need who have ethical wealth to some extent, I'll put it that way, need to be able to put back this kind of initiatives, because they eat down towards the institutional and the systemic issues that Africa face. And I think that's where we have the missing point, because most governments in Africa, and the pandemic has made it worse, are grossly incapacitated. And like I said, until there's an overwhelming evidence on opportunity that's provided by the private sector or by the social sector, finds that government is the most resistive element to change or even appreciation of technologies.
Olusegun, I'm keen to go back on a point that sort of touches on what Hopewell said and what you said as well, and also, but taking it back to the sort of the current situation following the SARS period in Nigeria, where government turned off Twitter, which is a big source of information. How has Civic Tech stepped into the fold to continue sharing information without platforms like Twitter, where people often access all this information?
I mean, so people have to innovate around that. And it's also very unfortunate. I mean, because the current government that we have in Nigeria relied on the opportunity that Twitter provided. I mean, to be able to push its message to the mainstream and get Nigerians engaged. Suddenly it feels that it's threatened by that. Or maybe because the president's tweet was deleted and they behaved like children, and then just trying to bring down the whole house. Whereas again, forget that there's so many people that rely on Twitter for information, run their commerce on Twitter and things like that. That exactly is something that the government has not taken account of. But Nigerians have to use VPNs, and there's a huge project. Nigerians are aware that it's a matter of time the government will have to yield, because elections are coming and nobody wants to come across to Nigerians as an entity that is restricting on individual freedoms, no matter how much insignificant it is, maybe to contextual issues for elections. Those issues, the issue around individual rights and freedom also matter to some certain class of electorates in Nigeria, especially those even livelihood will depend on that space. So we believe that the government will make adjustments as soon as possible. But it's just unfortunate that we are seeing same pattern of government attitude across board. Either you take it in Zimbabwe, we take it in Ghana, or we take it in Sierra Leone or wherever. The reality is that the digital space gives an equal opportunity and unfettered conversation around the true state of things, and most government, in order to protect their ego and to control narrative, they have a bit of challenge with that. Something that you see that maybe they copied off from China or things like that, being able to have free, open conversation. That's what Civic Tech does. That's what even platforms like Twitter does. And a lot of government will resist that significantly because in their own way, it threatens national unity, embarrasses the government, and threatens national corporate existence and wherever of conversation. For example, there's been current devaluation of the Nigerian currency in recent times. And there are two rates. There's what you call the official rate in codes and the unofficial rate, which is a parallel market. And divergence has been increasing over time. And there's a website called Abuki FX that publishes all the parallel market rates, which you get on the streets, to get dollars on the streets. But I guess that the government decided to shut down all their accounts, and finally threaten that company just because they were sharing information that it is as it is on the streets. So in some sort of way, we are not, and this was just yesterday, we are not unaware. There are already whispers of NGO accounts might be tampered with as we go along the way. Private businesses are being afraid. Because we're facing unprecedented times of decline of the civic space. I think we'll need more work to innovate around that. We will need more work to build technology around that. And one of the key organizations doing that recently is the Paradigm Initiative, based in Nigeria and half offices across Africa. And they're doing a lot of work in terms of giving people how do you innovate or you protect yourself in a very, very restrictive environment that we find ourselves.
I want to take that question and throw it to you, Hopewell. How are we innovating in Zimbabwe, where government is prone to turning off the internet, is prone to muzzling the media? How are we innovating in getting the message to the people?
What happened was that in 2019, when the government switched off the internet, Zimbabweans turned to VPNs. I had never heard of VPN myself until that time. But now we all have them on our phones just in case the internet is switched off again. And because of that, when they turned off the internet in 2019, what happened was it affected the economic sphere. What African governments sometimes, especially ours, don't understand is that human rights do not only apply to the civic space, they also apply to the economic space. So one of the companies that had the server in Zimbabwe, I'm not sure whether they still have that server, had a huge contract with Safaricom in Kenya. And when the internet was turned off, it disrupted the operations of M-Pesa in Kenya. And because of that, we haven't had a shutdown. I'm told by some of the people in the state that it's because they realize that it affects the economic situation, and companies will leave if they realize that they cannot have access to the internet. But I think that if they are really pushed, if they feel that they're losing their grip or their grip is loosening on controlling the citizens, they will switch off again. I think I want to add that what Zimbabweans have found and are now using a lot these days is Twitter Spaces. Every day there are discussions taking place. You have people with 2,300, 2,000 to 3,000 people listening Twitter Spaces. I'm one of those that have been sort of pushing Twitter Spaces as an alternative for Zimbabweans because we don't have radio stations that are independent. All the 10 radio stations in the country are run by the state. The one that is supposedly private is run by a ZANU-PF member of parliament. So Spaces, Clubhouse is another digital space where people are going and they're having discussions and they're able to then engage with the people that matter in public life. And I think going forward, it's also important for African scientists to come up with solutions that are specific to Africa, that address African problems. All the platforms that we have, the digital platforms that are used currently, they are Western, and we need to come up with something that is truly African, especially when it comes to dealing with internet shutdowns and things like that. Internet companies, as we saw in Swaziland, will always shut down if they are given an order to do so because they want to protect their business interests first. They don't care about the human rights aspect of shutting down the internet. So I think it's important for us to be innovative, for our scientists to be innovative and not just rely on Western technology when some of that technology has been devised by Africans who are living in the West.
Thank you, Hopo. I've got a question sort of in relation with what you're saying. Washington is asking, how can we achieve freedom of expression, speech, and persecution of journalists from our regimes in countries like Zimbabwe from your perspective? I would like to hear your views on a number of aspects, one of them being shutting down of social media, in which is looking like the norm in the moment.
Is that directed to me?
Yes.
I think in terms of journalists being incarcerated, like what has happened to me, I was thrown into prison 3 times inside 6 months for simply doing my work. And the 3rd time I was even thrown into prison for something that I had not done using a law that does not exist. So it's important for the citizens to engage with civil society and not to see civil society as an elitist space or a space where people working in civil society engage. Civil society is there to serve the people. It is there to educate the people. So if you look at Zimbabwe, there's a civil society movement called ZimCode. It has started a campaign called How Far. It is asking the government to explain why it has not fulfilled its promises. This is being done on behalf of citizens. So citizens must participate. Citizens must also push back when government abuses its constitution. I always wonder whether people understand that whenever they talk about reforms or the need for reforms in Zimbabwe, they are essentially talking about a government following the constitution and respecting this constitution. all the things that we have in Zimbabwe, all the problems that we have in Zimbabwe are rooted in a government that refuses to respect and follow the constitution. It refuses to respect and follow the rules and regulations and laws that it set itself, that were voted for by the citizens. So it's important for citizens to participate. It's important for citizens to realize that whenever people like myself are thrown into prison, we are being thrown into prison in order to stop the citizens themselves from understanding what is happening around them, from getting the correct information in order for them to be able to make the right decisions when they are now interacting with public life or public officials, or when they have to go and vote.
Absolutely. And what I'm getting from you, Hopewell, is that we shouldn't have just one Hopewell. We should have multiple Hopewells doing this work, because when they throw in one Hopewell into jail, there should be another Hopewell continuing the work, and that is key. I want to come to a question for you, Olusegun, from the Q&A, and I encourage everybody to continue asking questions via the chat or the Q&A function. A question here from Nati asking, how can civic tech initiatives coming up right now remain as sustainable as budget?
It's an ongoing conversation, sustainability. And I would say how we see sustainability in our work in terms of budget. One is that we pay attention to people first. When you say masquerade dances in the square, it's because there's someone behind the masquerade. So there's a lot of intentional work around putting people first as key element to sustainability. How do we make sure that we have the right and the quality people that can keep the mission alive? And that's something keeping sustainability. Second thing is also institutionalization of our work in the communities that we serve. So if we go in a community and we're working on project tracking, we're clear about that. We're not messiahs. We're not we're just trying to enlighten them and facilitate their awareness. So we expect that we might be there this year or next year. We don't need to be there in the third year for them to write a letter to their member of parliament around the community projects. And the way we institutionalize that is by working on community champions. So in each communities that we serve, we have champions who has much more civic and white enlightened and understanding, so that the work has some form of replacement, and irrespective of whether we are available or not. Something we do deliberately. The thirdly is about funding. There's a bit of dependence on donor funding. We are aware of that. We try as much as possible to spread our risk, so that we don't depend singly on the donor to do our work in a way. And what we do deliberately around spreading our risk is to ensure that different donors are able to contribute to programs over time. Then we also now offer services based on our capabilities. We have a growing company, fast-growing company called Fitila that provides bespoke digital services to the corporate environment. So this is what I mean. We do infographics, we use designs, and we realize a lot of people come to us and say, oh, I love your graphic, I love your design. Can you do the same thing for us? And we find that the company has a bit of ethical background, and it's not mirrored in some controversial situation. We don't do that kind of service for government. We deliberate about that. So we do this kind of services, and it contributes around 15% to our bottom line right now in terms of the kind of to our budget. So that's how we've been able. We hopefully think the next 5 years we can have a 30%, 70% matrix, which means 30% from corporate funding, which is to our Fitila vehicle, and 70% from grant vehicle. We're very honest with ourselves that we cannot run away from receiving grants to accelerate the work that we do. It's the same way with Transparency International, we think about its work. It's the same way we think about it, that we are not a fee-making or money-making organization, but we can keep a bit of balance as kind of opportunity that we have found in Fitila. Thank you.
Linked to that, Olusegun, is to being over-reliant on philanthropic funding. How can other civic tech initiatives that are not as established as budget sort of become independent and stay afloat without being over-reliant on funding from philanthropies?
It's a bit hard. It's a bit hard not to rely on philanthropies. And I'm saying this with all honesty and modesty. Because at the end of the day, the work that we do is public service. So it's public good. So in a way, if we intentionally overly commercialize it, then, or we tell people, we'll put a toll fee, then definitely there will be a challenge in that way. So in a way, we're very, very deliberate that our work is guided by Creative Commons policy, openness to all, attribution only necessary. So in a way, we see our work as public good and public service. If we're thinking clearly about building a business around this, we've done that already. We've done that even for 5 years. We're not certain that we have to reject some money. I mean, we have to take out, we deliberately not do some government contracts. Because I can't deny that most of the countries that we serve, government has a huge impact or a looming impact on public financing. So in a way, you are going to outrun into government contracts with respect to what we do. But one of the key things we're trying to do is do enough work around using our own capabilities and serving the corporate world with that. So we do design, we do infographics, we do website. The name of the company is called Fitila. You can check the website. The website is fitila.africa. I'll put it in the chat box. Someone mentioned about an online radio station. Yes, but we're thinking media. We're thinking about also pivoting into media in the years to come. Maybe having a online digital platform where we can break news, explain news, define news, and make it easier for people to use. So those are one of the key things that we are trying to do. Yeah.
Sorry, proceed.
Something close like the Morning Brew in the US. And being able to now do more explainer guides like Vox. So that's kind of the kind of place that we think we can put a blend in. Yeah, thanks.
That speaks to quite some of the successes that has helped sort of budget survive for this long and be successful. I mean, what are some of those secrets or tips for success that you've managed to be on top of your game for 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, there are no secrets. There are no secrets, just daily tenacity and being open to innovation and being and focused on the idea. The idea is to make sure that every public resources are optimized for the good of the people. Simple. And then whatever route, whatever innovation, whatever idea we need to make that happen, we do that. This is our anniversary week. Today is our anniversary dinner and awards. So, I mean, it's been an incredible journey. But most of the work that we do, we're very grateful to our founders. And we have a great list of them in a way. But what I tell people is focus on creating value, be tenacious, and be able to tell your stories, because we tend to underwrite our stories. We don't say enough of it. But when you have to be a doer and a storyteller both ways. And you have to proceed in equal proportions on there. We also didn't let that highly. But one thing I'm always very clear about right now is we need to tell stories. And we need to be able to more push. We are very, very engagement. And engagement continues. So that's kind of the work that we do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Olusegun. Hopefully, I want to come back to you. How are we creating value when social media is becoming, or is seen to becoming, more dominant than traditional media? How can journalism create value in that instance?
I think you're referring to the economic aspect of journalism. Of course, it's important for journalism to make money. That is what keeps journalism going. As my colleague said, the funding issues are very important. What I've encouraged people to do, especially Zimbabwean citizens, is to fund digital spaces which are providing information for them. Because the traditional method of donor funding has been getting funding from the West, but that is not always the case. And it's important for Africans also to learn to invest in their own institutions, Because when someone sets up a digital platform, it becomes an institution, and it's an African institution. I've seen in Nigeria, when I worked in the River State, that politicians would take control of platforms. And after that experience, I say to myself, citizens must also take control of platforms, so that if there is an outfit, a digital outfit that is doing great journalism, they contribute, like what the English do with the Guardian newspaper in Britain, where after every article, they give you an opportunity to provide or to donate whatever you can. That is what will keep journalism going in Africa, because the state has no interest in making sure that digital platforms succeed, unless if these are digital platforms in which it has a stake or it's controlling, unless these digital platforms are being used by the state as propaganda tools. So it's important for citizens to be innovative. And I've seen in Zimbabwe, even people running big social media accounts on Twitter, they are getting sponsorship through advertisements. People advertise their wares, their businesses, and so forth. And if that continues, it then assists those journalists that are running those digital platforms to carry out investigations, to produce quality journalism. At the moment, most of the stuff is funded. If these are, for instance, newspapers, they are funded through media, philanthropic organizations like Open Society. But I've always said, African businessmen themselves, I mean, they invite me in their homes. They are concerned about the state of affairs in the country. And I always ask them that, why don't you support good journalism? You have the money. Some of them are millionaires, some of them they're billionaires. But there's this wrong attitude that donor funding defines money coming from the West. Donor funding should be local as well. Even myself, there are platforms that I like that do great journalism, and sometimes I'll donate $20 US. If 1,000 of us do the same, it means that you've assisted them in doing their proper journalistic work. And so we should normalize assisting platforms that are doing good work and that we interact with every day, and not be selfish to think that we can only go and access news on these digital platforms, and yet we don't want to assist them financially.
If I can just come in there, and I guess we'll have to go to wrapping this segment, but it's interesting to me, the points you're both making about the importance of actually stimulating sort of whether it's African philanthropy or us contributing ourselves. And I sometimes wonder, well, two things. One is whether this idea of crowdsourcing, so Hopewell, when you talk about that $20 making a difference in a crowd, I'm not sure sometimes whether people realize that, because I don't get that. Maybe also people are asked to contribute to too many things in the family, in the, in the rural, and so they don't necessarily maybe have or want to contribute. But the second thing I wonder about when it comes to the idea of augmenting African philanthropy is whether the people often who have that scale of funding
It looks like we've lost Geshi there. I'm not sure if it's...
as it is, which means that the main people actually have an active interest in what civic tech and civic journalism are trying to do. Sorry, it says my connection is unstable. Can you hear me, Tsepo?
We can hear you now. Can you just rephrase your question again?
So my question was about the feasibility, if you want, of African philanthropy. Do our big moneyed people have an interest actually in encouraging free media and encouraging civic solutions, or are they too invested in the existing hierarchy?
I think that in speaking on the basis of what I've seen in Zimbabwe is that the business elites are in bed with the political elites. So they don't want to be seen to be funding things that are perceived to be anti-political elites, because if I expose corruption today, I'm exposing corruption that also to some extent involves business elites, because political elites do corruption and they do it with other people. And in most cases, it's with business elites. But there are some businessmen who have come to realize that the media is important. For instance, when we had the introduction of cell phones in Zimbabwe, the mobile phone network, the biggest mobile phone network in Zimbabwe, now Econet, was blocked from taking part, and they were not given a license. And they had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get the license. And the owner of this mobile phone network, Strive Masiwa, has spoken about how little people in the community would come and pray for him, provide a little bit of money towards his bills and so forth. So I would like to see Mr. Masiwa do the same for journalistic platforms, because he actually has a history of being helped by others. And I think he has done that in so many ways. He funded the newspaper in the early 2000s. He funds healthcare workers, and he does a lot of things. And I think it's important for business people to realize that today's government will be gone tomorrow. And if you don't invest in exposing the truth, if you don't invest in people getting access to information, it also affects your businesses. Today, businesses in Zimbabwe are struggling because the current system has collapsed. And we have been telling them for a long time that what we were talking about when we were referring to corruption is going to affect you one day, and it's now affecting them. Some of them will talk to you privately and they'll ask, how can we help? And I think we need to normalize that as Africans, to understand that donor funding does not refer to Western funding. It refers to money that is put towards the public good. And when someone is doing good stuff, like my brother in Nigeria, it makes sense for Nigerian business people to invest in what he's doing. Civic society is an important aspect. When it comes to civic society, they do voter registration. And when you get a good voter registration campaign, it means that people are able to elect a government that is competent, a government that they like. And if that government does not deliver, they're able to remove it. So people just assume that donating to something is just about journalism, but it's actually about building democracy. And building democracy works well when that democratic process is funded by locals who are going to benefit from it.
Thank you for that. So Olusegun, I'm going to come to you, but in a way we are now going into our closing round. So I'll ask you to incorporate final remarks as I load on just one more little question, which I hope you'll both respond to as well. And it's a question about the role of diasporas. So of the four of us here, maybe Tsepo is the one who this may not count for, because I don't think at least Black South Africans have a huge diaspora. But if we look at Nigeria, if we look at Zimbabwe, if we look at Kenya, we have huge diasporas. And I just wonder whether you might reflect on the pros and cons, you know, as we focus very much on grassroots and localization. So that I assume that means those of us who are here. But we also know we have this huge capacity that sits outside. And I wonder your perspective on that as a leverage opportunity, but maybe also as presenting particular risks as we think about innovation in the civic and media space. So Olusegun, if I could come to you with that question and ask you just to incorporate any closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you. I'm glad you asked this question about diaspora. And Nigeria has a huge diaspora. I mean, I shuttle between Nigeria and US. So I know that you can hear the grievances on both sides. And there is equally as committed as Nigerians living in the country. And I think it's time that we started a diaspora fund for civic innovation. I believe it doesn't have to be a lot of fun. Something you see people do with Guardian, $20, $30, $40. The diaspora be able to contribute some kind of money to support work or journalism or civic technology or projects that advance freedom or civic engagement. We also need a huge a stabilizing fund. I mean, for a while, I would try to raise an endowment fund for civic tech in Africa. I think we're very successful, so we want to go again next year. But we think that across Africa, there needs to be a yield fund. The same way you have fund directly, each fund is renewable energy, power investment. There should be a huge fund. Diaspora will contribute, huge corporates will contribute. Foundations globally will contribute, and people in Africa will contribute. So we have a fund that addresses work in Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, and everywhere across the country. We're due for something like that. But I feel the diaspora have a huge work to do, but it looks like they've not found that ethical, trusted vehicle to be able to bring their funds in. I guess someone has to deliberately build that and effectively market that to them about what you're trying to do and the impact they do. The way Africa gets marketed, it's marketed from a symptom perspective, which is donate clothes, donate $20 to feed someone in Africa. Why is someone not free in Africa? If Africa has huge resources and has the equal being part to effectively organize those resources for its benefit. So why is someone hungry in Africa? So there's something that we are not speaking to the core issues. And this is where Civic Tech is trying to transform significantly. So I feel there are an opportunity that we just have not cultivated them well yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Oluseun. Hopewell, if I could ask you also to just respond in any closing remarks.
I think it's important for the African diaspora to take part in this civic society and in journalism. I've been doing this in Zimbabwe. I've had to push the Zimbabwean diaspora to do that. When people are arrested, when people are tortured, I've said that we are not going to turn to donors. We are going to turn to you as citizens to provide funding for the families of these people. When recently we had 2 guys who spent 10 years in prison for a crime they did not commit simply because they belonged to the opposition movement. And I say it again, we are not going to ask the traditional donors to assist them to restart their lives. I turned to the Zimbabwean diaspora, and they were able to raise, I think, about $7,000 for these guys to start off. So I think it's important, people like myself and my brother in Nigeria, who are leaders in these spaces, we need to encourage our citizens who are living abroad in the diaspora to do these things. I think what is needed now is the leadership. People are willing to assist if you provide the proper leadership and if you provide a platform for them to do so. When I went to prison for the first time in July last year, I think that week and the week before, I had received about $2,000. People simply saying to me, we're sending this money to you. We don't know what you're going to do with it. We just want to say thank you for what you're doing. We know you're using your own money. And I said, no, I'm actually going to use this money to take it to a psychiatric hospital where I know that people do not have access to good medication. They do not have access to actually basic medication. Until such a time when I need help, I will continue taking this money. So I've encouraged Zimbabweans to say, if you want to support my work, you can do so, but you're doing so knowing that I will use the money for charity organizations that are close to my heart, and one of them is mental health. So I think if we now drive this message to the African diaspora, they can do it. I mean, when I lived in England for 10 years, and going to the pub, 3 pints of beer would cost me £12. And I know that an African living in the diaspora will not have a problem contributing £12 every month towards something that they think is important in Nigeria, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, or in South Africa. South Africa hasn't had this discourse as much as we have had it in Nigeria and Kenya and Zimbabwe because of the economic circumstances. Our economic circumstances are different. It's easier for a South African nurse to go and get a job, get a mortgage to buy a home, and get a loan to buy a car. It's not the same case in Nigeria. It's not the same case in Zimbabwe and Kenya. So the discourse on the diaspora is far much advanced in those countries than it is in South Africa. But I think at some point, South Africa will get there. because I've always said that South Africa should not see itself as exclusively different from other parts of Africa. We face the same problems. They are the new kid on the block. They are going to have to deal with some of the problems that Kenya maybe dealt with in the 80s and 90s, that Nigeria dealt with in the 70s and 80s, and that Zimbabwe dealt with in the early 2000s and continues to deal with this to this day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to Hopewell and Olusegun. Really great insights, great conversation. And I hope you, as the audience member, have sort of learned a lot from this, because I have. Really, really thank you so much. Just to move on to the next section before we do our closing, we want to share a bit of what we've taken away from this week as JamLab and as CTIN, and what are we taking forward from all the conversations, from all the sessions, you know, and to what we look forward to the next part or the next phase of the work that we do across the continent. I'll speak for JamLab, and then my colleague Geshe will come in to speak on behalf of Civic Tech. You know, at JamLab, you know, our core work is to support innovation and innovators across the continent. And we've always done that through our 3 programs. Our knowledge sharing program, which is an online magazine where we document all these changes that are taking place within innovation and journalism and media across the continent. Our second program is through our accelerator program, where we support and work with early stage media startups across the continent now, you know, to support them and accelerate their learnings and understandings of managing a media business in their respective countries. And the third is these kind of events where we come and we collaborate and we share knowledge with media practitioners across the continent. And as we continue our work as JamLab, one of the new projects that we've started, or that we've set up during this period, and that we'd like to sort of continue pushing as we conclude JamFest, is we're looking to build a media database where we want to create a list of established independent digital journalism and media organizations or platforms across the continent. You know, this would be a great way to learn about other similar work that are taking place across the continent and that you could work with or collaborate with. And so we ask for your help to come on board, go to the website, find the link to the form, and fill in as many as possible of a list of organizations that you know that deserve to be on that list, that we can share publicly with everybody. The second thing that we are working on, and we've recently, while we've been running the conference, is finalized interviews of media startups for our sort of 5th accelerator program, but our first sub-Saharan accelerator program, where we had teams from across the continent who would like to take part in accelerating their ideas and innovations. And so this program will continue or begin its work sort of immediately after this conference early next week. So we're excited about these 2 key changes or projects rather that are taking place within JamLab. And of course, there'll be others that are coming along. Do sign up to the newsletter. These will help you sort of keep in touch with how we collaborate, how we work. And of course, we are always open to working with everybody across the continent. And you know, this work doesn't belong to us or doesn't belong to journalism. It's our work as media across the continent. So please do come on board. Let's share ideas, let's collaborate, and take these conversations that we've had this past week forward. And in that, I want to bring in my colleague Geshe to talk about some of the Civic Tech work that we do. Because of course, as you can see, as JamLab and Civic Tech, we do collaborate, we do work together. And I want Geshe to sort of share some of those work that they will be doing as Civic Tech going forward.
Thanks, Tsepo. And indeed, I think it's been a great collaboration because there are a lot of beneficial overlaps between the journalism and media space and the civic tech space, certainly in terms of outcomes, what we're working towards, but increasingly also in terms of the platforms and technologies that we use to get there. So on the civic tech side, we had a really rich conversation yesterday with the stakeholders from around the continent, and most of them expressed real value that they see in this community of practice as a platform, and the value actually of convening such as this. So DIY Africa, one of the comments I think people made was that platforms like this mean that they don't have to go, or we don't have to go and meet each other out there in London or in New York or in Shanghai. We actually can gain a better appreciation of who's doing what around us just by convening on the continent. And the virtual platforms, of course, now make that more feasible. We were really encouraged by the community to strengthen, therefore, this convening and knowledge sharing function and the networking roles. We were asked to strengthen Africa-wide participation in the network. So I think the move of seeing CTIN as being beyond just South Africa, I think was welcomed. And we were also asked to address some of the critical challenges that are facing this community of practitioners, like unequal access and like the funding models, as we've partly been speaking about in this conversation as well. So I think on our part, we look forward to following up with all interested parties after this week to really leverage the community of practice to address these issues of social change and public good in Africa, empowering those who can leverage new technologies and methodologies and opportunities to own their power and agency. So we will certainly be curating the outputs from this conference, the videos, the documents, and all of that onto our website. We will be publicizing as well through the website and our newsletters any further opportunities and initiatives that people can engage with. These are increasingly including research and advocacy around some of these issues. So again, similar to Tsepo, we really encourage those of you who are interested to join us through the newsletter, keep track of our website, and just really get involved. We look forward to people actually owning this network. So I think with this, we hope you feel encouraged to stay on and remain involved. We want to go into the next bit of this closing ceremony, which is to invite our colleague, Ms. Kumo Sello, who has been what we called our exhibition correspondent all week. And we're really thankful for those of you who got to attend any of those sessions. Kumo brought a wonderful energy, but of course the exhibitors were quite splendid, you know, both journalism and civic tech exhibitors. And so I'd just like to call to the virtual stage Kumo to give us a bit of insight of what happened this week. Welcome, Kumo.
Thank you so much, Keshi. Yeah, it's been an amazing week, and we had fun at the Hangouts. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kumo Sello, like Geshi said. So I was the exhibitor, or I am the exhibition correspondent, since my role is not officially done. So this is how, so on screen, so let me blow up the presentation. Just so that I can see it. Okay. So on screen is how the exhibition booth looked like. You can still access the exhibition online. So in a nutshell, we had about 20 exhibitors, and then we hosted 4 daily hangouts. This was throughout the week, from Monday to Thursday, from 5 till 6. Cat. I am trying to move my slide. I don't know why I'm having issues. Okay, so there we go. So what happened? So we had interactive daily hangouts with selected civic tech and media innovators. It was a fun audience from all over the continent. We had exhibitors from Eswatini, Kenya, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Nigeria, Mozambique, and etc. And where are we now? So I'll be sharing some of the highlights from the sessions throughout the week. I think I like what Hopewell said earlier about social media, that it's a powerful tool if you know how to use it. So throughout the week, I was live tweeting the exhibition hangouts. This was just a gesture to, I think, leave legacy, where anyone else that couldn't be part of the exhibition could access at any time and see what went on, and also so that we could include those that could not join via Zoom. So in terms of the reflections, we hosted, like I said, we hosted exhibition daily hangouts from Monday to Thursday. We focused on 4 themes: urban innovation, justice, corruption, citizen participation, and media. I think from my side and from other people who like messaged me on the Hoover app, we could say that the journey was unique because the space was unique. It was a relaxed space, like the whole objective of it. It was informative. We had spicy engagements, and then other people got like networking opportunities. And then from myself, I think it was inspirational as well. So I would like to thank all our exhibitors, the audience, CTIN and GemLab for the correspondence role. I really enjoyed myself, and also I enjoyed the remarkable work from the different exhibitors. So this is a reflection of really some of the highlights in terms of what happened. Like I was saying to you, I was live tweeting. You can follow me, or if you missed some of the highlights, you can go to my Twitter page at Kumasello and then view some of the days. I think what impressed me is that some of the exhibitors and even like GemLab and CTIN were retweeting. So like the word was out there in terms of what is it that we were hosting. So in terms of day one, we featured Tulana, some of the exhibitors was Tulana, and then we also had Africa Data sharing some of their work. And then we also had Li-Fi led. So that, like I was saying earlier on, this was exhibitors across Africa. So it was not only South African based. In terms of the attendance, we had 20 people in the Hangout space. We have 4 exhibitors, like I said. The Q&A session for me, if I had to rate it, it was flowing. And the funny part is that we had 2 Zoom hackers. So yeah, I was shocked by that. In terms of impact, I think, like I said before, with the exhibitions, you didn't have to be like to look at them online and only attend the Hangouts to get a gist of what was happening, but the information was on Twitter as well. So I think I was impressed that our announcement for the exhibition itself, we got 105 expressions. So expressions are the times people interacted with the tweet. And then in terms of the highlights that we shared from the exhibitors, we got 180, the highest was 183 expressions, which was from an announcement that I made on Africa Data. So I was putting together tweets and updating what everyone was sharing. But I think for the sake of time, I'll just look at the highlights and then move on. And then in terms of day 2, which focused on justice and media, our exhibitors were Lumalo from South Africa, and then we also had Mine Alert as part of the exhibition. And I think in terms of the people that were in the room, we had 14 people attending. We had 4 exhibitors sharing their exhibitions. And then in terms of the Q&A session, I think it was fire. As much as we had like a smaller group, but the exhibition topic and sharing of information, it was on fire. So that day, likely we didn't have hackers, which was a relief. And then in terms of the highlight, our announcement for the exhibition was we got 157 impressions, and then the highlight of the top highlight that received most impression was from a post that I did on Mine Alert. They got 168 168 impressions. So this is some of the information that I shared on day 2. And then in terms of day 3, which was corruption and media, we had exhibitors from on the radar. We had I Take Action, and then we also had Corruption Watch. I think this was also one of the exhibitions that I really enjoyed. So in terms of the overall attendance, we had 20 people attending. And then the Q&A session was sizzling, I must say. And then also we didn't have haircuts for that day. And then in terms of our impressions, the announcement this day was like the most, like I think for me, I enjoyed, because even with our announcement for the daily hangout, we received about 564 impressions. So this was the top relating to other announcement. And then in terms of the tweet that went out and highlighted some of the work that the exhibitors did, we received an impression from on our radar. We got like 202 impression. So this was the continuation of some of the impressions and tweets that were put out. In terms of day 4, we focused on citizen participation. So this was our last hangout, which happened yesterday. Some of the people that we featured were a Mozambique-based platform called, so this one I really struggle to pronounce sometimes. So today I'm gonna try. So it's called Table Comunitario. And we also featured Cardinal magazine from Eswatini. And then we also featured Wazimap, VOA as well. In terms of the attendance, we got 70 people attending, and then we have 4 exhibitors presenting their work. And then the closing session was, we closed with a bang, like I said before. In terms of the impressions, the highest impression was 84, and then from the announcement, we got 180 impressions. So these are people that engaged with our tweet and information. So these are some of the highlights as well from, I'm not gonna go through them because I'll share the presentation and I think people could get a sense of what happened. And then, so the daily hangouts questions summary. I think most people were asking the exhibitors who funds you, and who are your users and how many users do you have on the platform, which was impressive because some had like more than 600 people, some had more than 6,000 users. And then how do you attract the users? This is mainly like media products that people use, such as newsletters, social media platforms, to say to people, look, this is to raise awareness about their platforms. And then also people were asked, how big is your team? Because of the amount of work that people did, we assumed that they had like a team of 150 people, and only to realize that actually in some cases it's only 3 or 4 people. And then the question of the challenges that the exhibitors are facing. I'm almost done. So this is my last slide. So in terms of the requests that I think I got from the exhibitors during the exhibition itself and on the side chat is that they are looking for funding opportunities to continue their work. So if you know any funder, grant that you'd like to share with the exhibitors, feel free to go on the virtual exhibition platform and then message them according to the themes that they're presenting. And then also they requested that CTIN create a chat, a group chat for all the exhibitors for possible collaborations. And then also they asked if we could organize sessions that will revisit some of the themes topic covered by the exhibition so that people are given enough time to share on what they do and the type of help that they require from other people. And then also lastly, please do, they ask that people still visit please visit the exhibition booth, because I think amount of work was taken to put out those exhibition booths. They're still available even on the CTIN website. You can still access them. So Zoom technicalities, that's it from my side. So thank you so much. Like I said, all this information in terms of highlights, it's on my Twitter page because I was live tweeting during the Hangouts at Kumaselo if you are interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumo. That was amazing. And I really would encourage anybody who didn't yet to check Kumo's Twitter feed. I guess she's going to be like a Twitter celeb now. Hey, Kumo.
I'm not sure.
You can exchange notes with Hopewell. I think he's also a Twitter celeb. So. And definitely check out the exhibition if you haven't done so already. So we're really coming into the final moments of our program, and I'd just like to do a few very quick thank yous. We'll have a song by Pilani Bubu, and then I think Tsepo will cue us out. So really just to give thanks and recognition to the speakers, Hopewell and Olusegun, who made time to be with us today. And I think we are all inspired by your messages, but also the learnings, I think, and the messages you have for us into this space and giving us some hope and signals into the future. We'd also like to recognize the participants. So all of you who came and joined us today and have been here to the bitter end. In particular, I'm reminded that we have a few of us here who've actually been at almost every session this week. So I'd just like to give shout outs to Nokuzola Singitwa, who I think is here. Nokutula, thank you for being here all week. To Sean from My Society, I think you've also been with us for most sessions this week, and we know that you're sort of in a new seat where you are, and we wish you the best. Thank you for being here with us. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you want to wave and do a turn. Also, I don't see here, but I think Rapudo Hawi from Kijiji Yetu and Rona Meyer were also with us almost throughout the week. And we just really like to recognize you all, to give shout outs. I see many other names that have recurred throughout the week. So thank you so much for those of you who have been able to participate. And of course, all of those who will be watching this footage later. I'd like to thank and recognize our sponsors, Civicus, Luminate, our partners, too many to mention. We'll have all of those on the website. I think they're there already. This wouldn't be possible without them. There's a lot of preparation, not necessarily direct cost. I mean, there are costs, but there's a lot of effort that goes into something like this, and we appreciate those who make it possible. Of course, the other side of making it possible is the design, delivery, and technical team. So the people behind the scenes who put a lot of effort into this. Many of you have heard from, particularly speakers, Lerato from WITS School of Governance has been an amazing support. The Jam Lab and the CTIN teams, Melissa, Sihle, Nati, of course, Kumo, who you just saw. Really, again, none of this would be possible without all of the efforts of all of those. So really just, and I'm sorry if I missed anybody's name. So just, again, a huge shout out to all of these people who make this possible. Without further ado, and then we'll come back to Tsepo just for a final wave off. I'd like to welcome again the wonderful sound of Philani Bubu to sort of sing us out with a performance of another song, Promised Land. As Tsepo said earlier, for us, the music is not just entertainment, it's really inspiration. It's one of the things I think that makes African life exciting and worth living, actually, is the gift of music and culture. So we're really pleased to be able to include other creatives in this form. So welcome, Philani Bubu.
I once wrote a song about Promised Land, and I really just wanted to express, the sense of belonging that we all human beings want, to find communities that are good for us, that are nurturing. And hopefully we can all find it here, and it's not about kind of going to heaven, but rather making things good and right here on earth. Promised Land. Every day I'm living someone else's life. Every day I'm singing someone else's song. I looked around trying to find someone like me here. Where have my people gone? Where have my people gone? I feel so alone. Where have my people gone? How can I prove that I'm living when there's no one loving me? I want a place where I belong. It's something I've wanted for so long. The good Lord's gotta lead me home, safe to Canaan's land. Where have my
people gone? Where have my people gone? I feel so alone. Where have my people gone? One day I'm gonna find the promised land, the promised land, the promised land. One day I'm gonna find the promised land, the promised land, the promised land. I'm going home, home. Said I'm going home, home. Said I'm going home. I'm going home. I'm going home. Said I'm going home. Said I'm just not home. Yeah. Said I'm going home.
What a way to end. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to going home as well. It's been a great week, really a great week of learning, a great week of sharing, meeting new people. Interacting. It's just been great. And I'm really grateful and happy and look forward to all the work that we'll all be doing together. And like Yeshi said, really thank you to all our partners. Thank you for all those who came on and supported us. It's been really great. And without everybody's support that came on board, I don't think this would have been as successful as it has been. Really great. And thank you to everybody. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, taking the time out of your work week. We know that everybody is Zoom fatigued, but you still made time to join us and be part of this great celebration of innovation across civic tech and journalism and media. That's it for us. That's it from us. Thank you for joining all the sessions. We'll definitely see you again next year, hopefully in person. That's my hope, just so we can see each other, hug each other, and just be in each other's presence like we did many years ago before COVID. Thank you so much. Goodbye and God bless. And thank you from myself, the Civic Tech Innovation Network team, and the GemLab Africa team, as well as the School of Governance and the Wits Journalism team at Wits University. We say thank you, goodbye, and God bless, and take care of yourself.
Sisi wenyewe ni mashujaa.
Nous sommes nos propres héros.
We are our own heroes. Power to the innovators, the DIYers across the continent.
Power to you who pushed the doors wide open.
Power to you who've planted good seed on fertile African ground. We celebrate you. Thank you for joining us. Visit our websites and social media platforms to continue the conversation.